Ready.
Yeah.
Als ze al gaan met Nick en Pieter.
Ik kan wel meer willen zetten dan een video even. Ik heb er niet zin in.
Okay. I'm going to go a little bit faster because I want to stop at 11 o'clock to have some time to do a small exercise. What are we going to ask of you in the first 3 weeks? Well, we don't know exactly because it all depends on where you guys end up. But I have some indication. I'll just show you 3 small videos and I'll give some description of what I think is relevant in the first product. So it should be really existing, not just a story, but there should be something that, well, it depends on whether it's tangible, whether you can grab it or not. That depends on the nature of the product, right? But it should be really a thing and not a beamer presentation. I think there's, except for the product that is in the hallway of the building, the other 2 products could never be, in terms of a demo, they could never be on the wall. Because they are tables, so they should be on a table. We should stand around it, right? In the demo. So you have to think about how to make that work. Maybe take a beamer and put it upside down or whatever, if you don't have the actual touch table yet. And the people that go into the entrance of the hall, I would like the first prototype to be there. And I would like to ask, we will meet in a room for the final presentation in 3 weeks, and then I would like for you to ask us to say, well, come with me and we'll show you the demo, and the demo would be there in the hall. Something, right? Something experiential in the hall. And ideally, the people of the library would ask us to go to the library and show it there. And there might be all kinds of practical reasons why you finally choose not to do that, but that is the ideal. Right? So don't think about classrooms, beamer presentations, standing and saying, well, our project, don't think about being there in the real context. You can use partly what is called Wizard of Oz. Well, you know all the story of Wizard of Oz, who created a whole world that turned out to be completely fake because he was behind the controls in the back. He was controlling everything with levers and turning wheels and such. So what you could do is make a multi-touch table with a glass plate, and you could actually put some one of you inside the box doing the bottom parts, right? Moving the cardboard as if it was really a computer. Or there are other more subtle or elegant ways of doing Wizard of Oz. But you can do that, right? This has originated, the term Wizard of Oz and this way of thinking has originated in user research, especially with telephone systems. So automatic telephone systems that would recognize your voice and then give answers to at what time is the train leaving, those kinds of systems. You could easily fake them with real people on the other side of the telephone, reading off the official sentences that the computer would otherwise have said. And then you didn't have to buy the technology yet, but you could already test whether people would understand the words and the sentences in the system. So they tested it like that. It's called Wizard of Oz. And then you can use the beamer, webcam, Arduino components. You're going to Rob is going to show you Thursday what you could do with that. You could make all kinds of input output very easily. Well, fairly easily. You'd have to do some programming. You could do small bits of Flash, ActionScript or whatever, depending on your own skills. But you could even use PowerPoint for a lot of faking that looks really good from the outside. And it's more about presenting the idea than about presenting the technology, right? Laptops, tinkering materials. With tinkering materials, I mean cardboard, paper, real stuff that's just lying around, like what is that? The camera pole that you found, the tripod. Thank you very much. That you already found in the first assignment. Okay, what you also want to do is show the user, not just the product, Or to be more precise, you show the user, the product, and the interaction. Because it's about the interaction in the end. Right? So you show what people do with the product and the result that it gives. You also show the basic activities of the user and how the new product fits into that context. So if I would make my special social mediating coffee machine, I would show people coming out of their offices at 11 o'clock. I would show a clock saying 11 o'clock and then people going out and then blah blah blah. Oh, did you hear about this guy? Oh, he's been fired. What? What did that? And then the coffee machine would do its thing, right? What you could choose to do, but I leave it to you, is first show the current situation and then what adding your product would change. So it's sort of before and after scene. You could show that, if you know. And you would have to use some kind of acting out or theater to do that, right? Because we would have to have real people doing it. You could videotape the people, or you could show it directly in the demo. But basically, in a presentation, we would always ask you to show it, to do it. And in the first presentation, you would yourself probably be the actors. But maybe in the end, your prototype is so advanced and sophisticated that you can simply ask someone from the audience to use it. Of course, that's very difficult to do in the beginning if you have to tweak everything to be just right. You want the user to press exactly the right buttons. Right? Well, this is, I already said this. Input, output, physical, digital. And the basic idea is to let us experience the product. Its use, its value, the idea behind it. And ideally there's no further explanation necessary, but probably you would have to give it somewhat of a context. Somebody talking about it, like this is the basic idea, so now you would go to the next phase and blah blah blah. Right? But the centerpiece is the interaction itself, not the PowerPoint story. Basically, don't do PowerPoint presentations at all. Don't do keynote presentations. Don't do what I do. Okay, so here's you've done this yesterday. You already did this yesterday. This is a concept for an interactive floor. And, well, like you experienced yourself yesterday, in about a half an hour, you can already make a product experiential.
Het is fantastisch, omdat je echt kan zien wat je doet en wat de feedback is duidelijk te zien.
Listen here to what the teacher finds interesting.
Maar het ging heel snel. En wij zijn helemaal nieuw met dit spel. Kan je hem nog één keer doen en dat je hem een beetje in slow motion doet, heel duidelijk de losse stappen, en dat één van jullie erbij vertelt wat we zien.
That is what I would like to see, right? This is a thing that we made in half a day, and it's actually, it could also be made in a half an hour, but you have to think, we also designed it, we thought we created the concept also in half a day, right? So the end product is very simple. It's just a mobile phone, but by putting it in a foam core, it now becomes a new product. So we just put a new shell in it, and we made some pictures on it, and what it is a sort of personal avatar that you can put on pictures that you like in a brainstorm session, and you can then photograph these pictures and take it with you, and then at home you would have all the pictures of the brainstorm that you find interesting, and other people would know in a brainstorm session that this guy, because his picture is always on the front, likes that picture, so people could ask him, why did you put your avatar there, and that would spur more communication in brainstorm sessions, which is an idea. But it's just a very easy way of having some kinds of digital technology, but in reality there's no programming or nothing, right? This is just, it's all fake. But just by putting your normal mobile phone in a different context, different physical context, you can now communicate some concept to people. And you could do that with laptops, with beamers, with tablets, with everything you have available. There's a very nice example of Bill Buxton, who is a very famous interaction designer, who had a tablet PC. It was just a tablet like that. You could use maybe also an iPad, I don't know. But he had a tablet PC and he also had a mouse. I think it's an old example because in the iPad you wouldn't need it anymore. But in those days you didn't have the iPad. So he had a tablet and a mouse, and he just taped the mouse on the side of the tablet. And then he put on like Google Maps or something on the tablet PC. And when he then would move the whole tablet, the mouse would move in the same way. So actually it would be like moving your tool over a map in the same way as the table idea of one of your assignments, right? And it was just by simply coupling the output to the input with tape, right? Mouse and then you would have a whole new experience. Those kinds of simple tricks you could think about, because you guys are skilled in using not only cardboard and paper, and maybe you are even more skilled in using modern technologies as tinkering materials. Tinkering means knutselen en uitproberen, experimenteren. Right? So that you don't use the technology really for making the final thing, the engineering, but you use it as a to improvise. Right? Okay, clear. And this is more of a project that would that you could maybe make in half a year. That I would really call a fully functioning prototype. He says if I blow on it, it should react. It's not really clear. Well, clear in the it's not really clear on the beamer screen. You can look at it later. This is a prototype of a thing that would sort of vase that would stand in your house, and if you blow on it, it has a CO2, carbon dioxide sensor. So it means that if the level of carbon dioxide, if the oxygen level drops in your room, it would start to move and make kinds of noises like an old man that goes. So it's very subtle and elegant way, like artist way, of giving feedback to people about the quality of the air. But this is really working, right? There's really a CO2 measurement device. But using Arduino, you could fairly easily make that. You have to find on the web whether you could buy a sensor like that. And I will show you some later of these sensors. Okay. Should we put this down as well? It's always such a shame to shut out the real world in order to see pictures on the screen. Don't make it too dark, because otherwise you can't see me anymore. Am I still on the picture? Okay. Brainstorming. I want to give you a very small assignment later on. But the only point I want to make clear here is that brainstorming is not only a way of getting good ideas, it's also a way of doing research. In a way. Because when you explore the whole space of possibilities, you're actually also investigating what could be possible. So it's an investigation. And if you see the design space as a sort of, if you see all the possibilities as a space, called the design space, then what you do by brainstorming is that you try to get into every far corner of the design space so that you know, okay, so within these bounds, our solution is going to be. And of course there's no strict boundaries, because the longer you think, the bigger your design space becomes. But there's real constraints like time and money and requirements that are given to you by other people that are not in your own power. So these are the real walls within which your design space is. But within that space, what you can do is you could start here in the space and then take very little steps like, oh, maybe we could do this design, or maybe we can do this design. Maybe it would be a good idea to add a little red button here, or maybe we could, but then you won't get anywhere, right? Because the space is the whole space, and you're staying in the same spot. And so the point of brainstorming is to get out of your, what is called your comfort zone. Stuff that you know, stuff that you can think about in 10 minutes, stuff that you think about won't give you too much trouble if you really have to make it later on. That's all comfort zone stuff. You want to get out of that and say, what would be over here? And what would be over here? Right? And to get as far as possible, not because you actually want to make something that is here in this corner of the design space, but because you want to see, you want to find out what the design space is. You want to learn about the space itself. Right? How big is it and what kind of dimensions does it have? Is it 3, 6, 7 dimensional, blah, blah, blah. So this is a way of exploring that space. And so in that way, I call it analysis. That's a strange term to use because people are used to think about analysis as something that comes first. First you start to think about what is the case, right? How does the world work? And then you start thinking about how can we change it and what should we make, what should we create. First you analyze, then you synthesize, you create. First you think, then you do. Right? First you understand, then you act. That is a normal way of seeing how the world works. But it's not how the world works. Doing stuff, acting, creating, is also a way of analyzing. Because by taking steps in the world, you explore a space. Right? And if you want to learn about a city, you don't go sitting in your hotel room reading the book of the city completely from front to back and then making lists of all the things that you want to see and then making a whole plan of how you want to walk. Well, there are people who do that. Some kinds of tourists. But me, I'm more of a person that sort of quickly flips through the book a little bit on the train going there and then you jump in. Right? You want to be in the city. You want to experience it. You want to smell it. You want to explore it. You want to learn about the structure of the city by walking in it. And that is what you need to do as designers as well. At least I encourage you to do it. But next to this more creative stuff with pictures that we just saw, there's also the more classic research stuff, which is also very interesting, especially if you want to design from a user end perspective. Right? If you just want to create technology, don't bother about this slide. But if you want to create technology that is meaningful for people, then you want to think about this stuff alongside with your creative exploration. So I see these two as two parallel streams. Right? You brainstorm and you research the user and his context and the people that you're going to design for. You do that in parallel. And you try to integrate that slowly, step by step, into the final product. Well, very quickly we're going to talk about a lot more about this. But what you need to know something about in the coming 3 weeks, and you have to find out for yourself how you're going to do that. And in the second iteration we're going to do it a little bit more structural, methodological. But you have to find out something about the people that you're going to design for. And then you can think about the following aspects. Physical, which is classically called the ergonomics. The psychological aspects, what do these people think? What can they know? What do they know? What knowledge do they have? And their social aspects. For instance, what is the difference between students and teachers and library personnel in social terms? Because they are a part of an organization, right? You're designing a multi-touch table within an institution. And this institution has certain norms, certain things that are normal, or this is how we do it in this school. And you have to know about that. It doesn't mean that you have to design a table that completely goes with the flow of the norms. You could design a multi-touch table that goes right against some of the cultural norms here in this organization. It would be interesting to do it. But if you want to do that, you first have to know what the norms are. Otherwise you can't protest it, right? You have to know what to protest against. Then you'd have to know about what are the kinds of things that these people do. What is the normal routine of library stuff? What goes on in the library? What do people do in the library? And please, I put in parentheses normal versus problematic, right? Because that's all very relative, of course. But you're a designer, so you have to think about normal stuff. Always a little bit in the context of, and what's problematic about it. Because if there's no problem, then you don't have a job. Right? If everything goes perfectly okay in the library, then why put a multi-touch table there? It costs a lot of money. So you have to make some kind of problem of it. But that's a creation of your mind, right? Because it could be that some people think it's not problematic, other people have lots of problems with the library. It's very personal. You could also say, I'm not going to call it problems, I'm going to call it opportunities. Which is a little bit more nice way of saying that there are problems that need to be solved. Right? It's just a matter of how you speak about it. Opportunities is fashionable today. Designers don't talk about problems anymore that need to be solved. They talk about opportunities that can be addressed. There will be a new word in 5 years. Then you need to know about the context, and implicitly I already spoke about the context in the first two, in people and activities, because I've been talking about the library with its institutional norms, etc. That's all part of the context, really. But there's also a physical context, right? So there's not only a social and a cultural context, an organizational one, there's also a physical context. Where does this table go physically? Can you walk around it? Is it something that is in the walk? Or is it something that's in a separate room that you go to and you have to go through a door? If you first have to go through a door, especially go to your product, it will give a completely different experience than if it's something that everybody just walks past and doesn't, if people don't stand still, if it's not normal to stand still there, then you have to design a sort of walking interaction, right? So going through the door to the main building has both of these aspects. It has the aspect, so the contextual, physical aspect of stepping inside. Wow, it was cold outside, now I'm in. That's a moment, right? That's a psychological moment for everybody walking in the building. I'm in, made it just in time. And then you have walking. So you guys have to design an interaction that is about international bonds between all the people in the world, blah, blah, blah. But the main activity going on there is going in, being in, and then walking. Walking to where you want to go. So you have to really be aware of that and connect to that in your design. So read this chapter 2 in the book, and I will try to get the first part online. I have scanned it once, but I can't distribute it, officially forbidden, so I won't distribute it, but you can make an individual copy of it, right? We will talk about it later. Okay, I'm going to skip this one, but you can look at the words later, because I've said a lot about it already. Now, just a very, very, very small introduction into interaction design. I'm just going to tell you one thing, one message. And the message is that things have changed in history. Right, so in the old days, and this is not a very old picture, but in the old days, like you guys are sitting here as well, behind the computer, this was the interaction. And what you see in this picture is that input and output are not connected in form, not always connected in time, and the input and output are also very disconnected from the content. Because there is no way that you can see by the looks of this product what the person is doing. It could be basically anything. Right? And that's the basic idea of a general computer system. Anything that's interesting about your task that you're doing is inside, in the virtual space. And the input and output structure is simply just a means of connecting the user to the content. And the content is in the digital system itself. This is very different from interacting with a chair. Because this chair, already even before I sit on it, communicates its central function. So the content of what is relevant for me about this chair is right there in its form. Right? And interacting with this chair, my input and the output from the chair are completely coupled. Because when I give input to the chair, like this, I immediately feel the feedback that the chair gives to me. It's actually a little bit strange to talk about input and output from a chair, right? It's sort of an information processing view on chairs. Now, computers are essentially information processing systems. But what you see is that more and more and more, the interaction with computers becomes less and less like information processing. And it becomes more like simply sitting in a chair. So, for instance, here you have a computer system with which to control a 3D puppet on a screen. But controlling the puppet you actually do with a physical puppet. And all the elements in the physical puppet are wirelessly connected to the central system. Now the input relations are now just like a chair, right? The puppet communicates what you can do with it in its form. But the output is still visual, and it's not in the same place as the puppet itself. That also relates to the task, because the task is still to control something in a virtual space. That is the task in itself. So it could never be, the output could never be in the puppet, because then you wouldn't have any meaningful system for this. This system is to make digital puppets and then use them in animations and stuff. Now, one step further is this system. It's a sort of a multi-touch table, but it's not multi-touch, it only has tangibles. So these are real objects on a beam screen, on a projection. And it's for controlling a laser. So this thing here is the laser, but it's not a real laser because the laser beam is simply animated. And what you can do with it is learn about lasers. So you're a physics student and you can try out mirrors. So all these other things are mirrors. And you can play with the mirrors and see how the beams refract and you have transparent stuff and semi-transparent and full mirrors, and then you can see about the angle at which the beam goes in and out. And then, of course, in physics class you have to learn about the mathematics behind it. So the interesting thing about this thing is that in operating it, it's just like a chair, right? It's direct manipulation. What you do, you immediately see back at the same spot. If I turn this mirror, this beam changes just like a real one would. But you add a little bit, because now you have a computer system, so now you have the possibility to actually project the angle at which the beam comes in and out. And that is why in this picture, which is a nice example of how you communicate a concept, in this picture you also see that this student has a student textbook of physics lying next to him. So what this picture is actually communicating is that with this tool you can connect your physical experience, trial and error, and the mathematics behind it. And you can check, oh, it should be like that. And what the people that made this hope is that, for instance, if you then later make your assignments in your textbook or on your exam, and you calculate, and you mistype on your calculator, and you have given a sort of assignment, and you say, oh, well, the answer should be 128 degrees, that you then immediately think, that could never be the case. No, if I do, and then you use your hands, you close your eyes, and if I do it like this, no, it should be less than 45. It should never be one. I made a mistake, and you recalculate and think, ah, yes, you see, I made a mistake, because you now have this sort of bodily experience of how these angles work. And this last example is a very strange object that has no graphical user interface at all. It's completely physical, but it's still an interactive product. It's based on the idea that people in meetings always play with the bottle of water or with a pen. Actually, the designer now made a pen version, so I should put in a picture of the next iteration. This was the first prototype. This is supposed to be sort of generic bottle kind of thing. You sit in a meeting with your director and financial manager and other CEOs. You have to sit there, you don't like this meeting, you have to sit it through, and they're saying stupid stuff, and they're saying stuff that maybe eventually will get you fired or your department closed down or whatever, so you're becoming agitated and you're fiddling with the bottle and you're becoming frustrated, and your frustration is going into the bottle, and you're not being Zen and Buddhist at all, so you're playing and playing and playing, and then the bottle, which has a servo motor inside and some stuff recognizing movements, will recognize that you become frustrated, and it will start to push back. So it becomes increasingly difficult to move the bottle, and then suddenly at some point your unconsciousness kicks in your consciousness and says, whoa, guy, dude, relax, you know, don't get fed up with these people, and then you can say,
or you get frustrated a lot more.
Maybe, yeah. But that is then, first he thought, the designer, that's a good question, but the designer thought of the concept, then the interaction should be designed as well to get to the good, to reach the goal that you want. So that is something that you have to test. And he was learning a lot about what is frustration and how do people get information from feeling stuff. And what kind of signal does that give you? And, well, I don't know if he succeeded. He did his PhD, so we should read the book and then find out if he can argue convincingly that the product actually works. Right? I don't know about that. But I just wanted to show it as an example of an interaction, an interface, that, well, the funny thing about this thing is that if you start to think, where does the output go? The output does not go to a virtual, it's not about connecting a person with a virtual system, right? As in normal computing. I'm not connecting a person to a database, but what am I connecting this person to through this interface? Does anybody have any idea? So this is the interface, and here's the user. What is the system? What do I connect the user to?
Himself?
To himself, exactly. This is a feedback interface. And if you start to think about it like this, then you will realize that, of course, all these examples are also in some way ways of connecting a person to himself again. Right? If I'm typing a text in Word, you could say the interface is connecting me to the Word software. But actually the Word software is presenting me back my thoughts, and then I'm reading it again, and I'm thinking, oh no, I shouldn't write that, I should write something else. So there's also a kind of feedback to myself there. And I think that's a very interesting way of looking at interaction, that there's always, in the end, a sort of feedback through the system to yourself or to other people. And in that way it would be a sort of communication system. Communicating with yourself or with other people. And that is why there is also a book called Interaction Design, and it says on the first page, interaction design is about designing the interaction between people. And the first time I read that, I thought, what? designing the interactions between people. It's about designing the interaction between me and the computer, right? That's interaction design. But if you start to think about it this way, then you slowly realize that in the end, whatever system you make, whatever technology you make, it's about interacting people. Even if I make a hammer, it means I facilitate the interaction between the carpenter and the client, in a way. Right? You could say. Okay. Well, before just a very quick slide. I'm not going to say a lot about it. I hope that these lists will grow. And if you have interesting websites or communities or events to share, please email them or put them on the SharePoint site. There's one interesting site, it's a Dutch one, Johnny Holland, and that's a good interaction design site that I don't know much about yet, so I hope you will give me good links to things that are on that site. For everybody who's interested in multi-touch or movement-based interaction, you always end up in either the Nui groups or the or Johnny Lee's side with who was sort of the Wiimote master. He can do stuff with Wiimote that nobody can. Of course, there will be a new Johnny Lee this year, and he will do the most crazy stuff with the Xbox Kinect, right? Because the Kinect, as I've been told, is going to be the new Wii, not only for the game players, but also for interaction designers. Right? Because so the Wii has been used for lots of tweaks and stuff. Now you will see the Kinect being used for fun stuff. And perhaps one of the projects can do that. I'm really interested in what we can do with the Kinect. Well, let's make a good list. And the book is up there. I'm going to show this, and then I'm going to show you some of the movie pictures, just to get your creativity going. So next week, well, somewhere in this week, between this moment and next week, I expect you to work on these things. You have to get your project definition very clear. And that involves back-checking with your client in some way, and orienting in the subject matter, and reading about it and stuff, right? You cannot know your project definition right now. You don't have the knowledge yet. You don't have the information. So you have to find the information and make a better project description than you have right now. You have to order the book. You have to read about people, activities, context. And there's also technologies. It's 4 letters. I've only discussed 3. And Rob is responsible for T, so I won't discuss that. But in this book, it's one complete system. You have to plan your PAC study. So you have to think about how are we going to learn about people in the library in some way, and how and where in the coming 3 weeks are we going to do that in such a way that we can still use that information for our design process. Make a planning, make a schedule. And I don't mind if it's finished next week, Tuesday or not. It should be at the right spot in your project plan. Right? So do what you think is good. And then do a brainstorm. Right? And in the brainstorm, I want minimum of 30 concepts that you also draw out on one piece of paper, maybe. You quickly make a sketch of the concept and you write a little bit about, okay, this is one concept, next. And you make sure that you have 30 and that they are as far apart as possible. So not 30 ones here. Red button, green button, triangle button, circle button. That's not 30 concept, right? 30 concept is the whole design space. And I just put a 30 to push you into the whole design space. 29 is also.
But what about 30 different aspects of the concept?
No, that's
of the assignment.
Yeah, but that's not.
Do they count? in the 30 ideas?
Can you give an example? Or
Like we have the moving table.
yes.
And one aspect of it is the table itself.
Yeah.
One aspect is the user interface. One aspect is maybe the website. So it's are all different kind of things.
Yes.
Where you can have different ideas.
I understand. I think you can make a sort of matrix, and in total it can be 30, but there's two goals I want you to work on. And the one is to explore what are all these aspects. So if these are all the aspects, then of course it's very good, especially because you don't know yet. We can work on this element, we can work on that, we can work on that. So it's good to explore all these different aspects. And you can use a brainstorm to do that. But once you have an aspect, like one certain aspect X, I don't know, don't have an example right now, then brainstorming is about freeing up your mind. And you can only do that if you don't get stuck in the first 3 immediate ideas about how to do that thing. But if you really push yourself going deep and discarding the first 3, right? So it's like first freeing your mind of the stuff that's already in there, and then keep on brainstorming, because then you really are exploring the design space. So what you say, what I would say, actually there are as many design spaces as there are aspects. And for each design space you need to go at least a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Okay, but not 30 ideas per aspect.
I think you can be the judge yourself in the end. Did we stay in a safe area? Or did we sort of cracked our brains a little bit and went out? And if you can do that with 5 ideas, it's fine with me. I'm finally not judging on the number, I'm judging on the quality.
Okay.
So, but I want you to draw a quick sketch because otherwise you've only been talking about it. So you have to make it tangible in some way. And it can be a very quick pencil doodle with some text. It can just be an actual sketch. You don't have to type it out or make a PowerPoint presentation of it. But just make sure that you really have the design space so that you can put it up your wall and say, this is the design space. You can look at it, right? Because otherwise you're brainstorming and then it's gone. And then you flip back into your comfort zone. And if you have all these ideas, then you can start thinking about, hey, what's good? How to decide what's good. You can't know it in advance. I mean, the client gives you some requirements. So there's some list of what's important in the assignment. But you can also look at what you've been brainstorming and then think, oh, I have all this material. Are there some patterns in there? Are there things that are by themselves already better ideas than other ideas? Just because it's just a good idea, because it has some sort of magical interestingness. And then you can start to think about, what is it about this idea? Why is this idea so appealing? Why does everybody say yes when we thought about that one? And then you can start to judge the other ideas on that criteria. So it's also a way of creating criteria for what is good. Well, and then you have to, of course, make your story, because you have to make a choice. There's one idea that finally is going to be the concept, right? So with 30 ideas, I actually mean 30 things that could be the final concept, and then you choose one. But this time you're also allowed a little bit to combine. So it could be 30 ideas, and then you take 3 of them, and you combine them into one. That's okay. That's not a problem. That's called integration. But you cannot make a concept in which all these 30 ideas are connected in one big, humongous, ugly, total system. That is not design. And you have skipped a whole part of what is design, because design is also making choices and about not doing things. Alright? But this is for the last part of the 3 weeks. This is more for the beginning. Okay? Well, I think you can put out the video, and I'm going to show you some movies.